So, can you cover a game if you don't truly fully understand it? I think this is the eternal question for journalists or for interviewers. Now, what I would like to say on this topic is consider the combination of skills maybe that you would need to be the pinnacle of what would be considered an excellent interviewer or an excellent journalist. First of all, you have to be a great writer. You have to be an eloquent interviewer. Maybe you could be a former player to understand the pro aspect of it. You also need to be, eloquent in your speech. Oftentimes, you have to be a great video interviewer or video editor because, you're first starting out on your own, etc. And lastly, but not least, you need to be entertaining. So all of these combinations and all of these skills is actually incredibly rare to find, on top of the idea that maybe you would probably need to be grandmasters in order to be have the epitome of what I would consider as top game knowledge of the entire game of what is League of Legends. So all of these combinations of things is actually just super rare, which is why we don't see these people within the media or within journalism or interviewers, etc. So, disclaimer, I'm not anywhere near that in probably all of those different categories as far as being the top. I peaked I think it was plat 2, I want to say, in 2017 or some shit. I don't know. Anyway, I finished fucking 2021 gold 4. Yeah, baby. But what about streamers, though? You're saying maybe what about these guys? Because they're great speakers. They do great content, etc. Ones maybe that are pro that became content creators. Well, just think about the few that have actually made it to where they are successful or that they've made various other types of content. You can kind of count these people on one hand in terms of what I just said, and as far as what you need to be successful when it comes to being a journalist or an interviewer, etc. Because at this current day and age, you are required to have more skills than what was previously before. So the few people that I can think of are actually Double F Dom, LS, Cage Roll, Sneaky, Meteos, couple extras, right? Febevin I can think of actually too. I think he's doing pretty well in streams. But point is, fact that it's not all that it's cut out to be of just because you have high game knowledge that means that you can fulfill all these other things. And so I think essentially it boils down to the question of, if you have higher game knowledge, does that actually help in terms of, I guess that we'll call it the journalist aspect, right? Or the interview aspect. I would say yes, actually it does. In the fact that you can ask more specific questions rather than broad questions to your subjects. You can ask maybe what this particular meta means, or, hey, I heard, this particular item, I heard Gourd Drinker got nerfed, but I'm seeing some top laners take it or something like that. I don't know if top laners actually taking that, right? So don't flame me on that. But, I hear some people are particularly taking this, and if you're more inclined to analyze the game more specifically, you'll be able to realize a lot of these other things, right? And Crown of the Shattered Queen or whatever, right? The one that gives you the shield, which gives you a debuff on damage that is taken to you. Obviously, that's taken by control mages. So essentially, this is foreshadowing here. What I'm gonna ask a lot of fucking people in the mid lane is how broken is Crown of the Shattered Queen? It's because I understand what's going on within the particular meta. I'm not saying that I'm high elo. I'm not saying I understand the game to a very high degree. But I am saying that because I know about the game to some large degree, I guess. I'm not saying that I'm good. I'm saying that I understand the game to some degree, that I can ask that type of question, and that's poignant, right? That's something very specific that you couldn't get out of, like, say, for instance, non-endemic versus endemic people, right? So people that are from, I don't know, like CNN or the BBC or some shit, right? They're not going to ask about Crown of the Shattered Queen item. You're only going to get that from someone like me, or someone like, that's actually in the industry, right? As far as like esports is concerned. So you're not going to get that from some fucking random, right? So it is true that if you have higher game knowledge, you're actually able to ask further, more in-depth questions, which is the whole non-endemic versus endemic aspect of the fact that esports heaven is going to be able to ask more intrinsic or in-depth questions rather than the BBC or the Washington Post, right? So I think, yes, higher game knowledge does help. Now, you come to like these weird quasi people of, like someone in the past, like Loco Doco, for instance, who was a former player, former coach, has very high game knowledge, whether you like to admit it or not. But the idea of him asking questions or being affluent as far as like an interviewer is very lacking in the beginning. I'd say he brushed it up later on as he came about. But point is that he had some of his pluses, which outweighed some of the pluses of other people, like me, for instance. So you kind of have to pick your poison in that sense. So ideally, what you would want is someone that has high game knowledge, charisma, speech, is great at writing, understands everything about the game, etc. But the likelihood that you're going to find that person is like nil, especially considering the fact that esports is such a niche within a niche, right? So you have gaming, and then you have esports, and then you have League of Legends esports, right? So it's niche, right? So it counts down on the amount of people that can actually be selected for something, and then people that want to go into journalism or writing or interviewing, etc., right? So like it goes like way down the fucking line. So the likelihood that you're gonna find that person is pretty nil. In fact, I think I had only met 2 people ever that were masters and above in all of esports journalism. It was Loco Doco, and then there was this other guy. I forgot his name. Now he works for Nerd Street, though. So anyone that recognizes who I'm talking about, drop him in the comments below. But now he works for Nerd Street. He used to do some op-eds for ESPN, in fact, back in the day. ESPN Esports. Anyways, so at the end of the day, you can't ask questions that you don't know about. So that means that if you don't have high enough game knowledge, you probably can't ask that question. You can't ask about Crown of the Shattered Queen and the implications that it means on the meta, because a lot of control mages are probably going to pick that, which I assume I'm actually correct on. I don't know. I haven't heard anyone talk about this shit, but I assume that I'm correct because I know a little bit about the game, right? And I can make that assumption because I think that I know enough about the game in order to make that assumption. And I might be right, I might be wrong, but I feel like I'm right about that type of shit. But the point is that you can't ask questions that you don't know about. So like the non-endemic people can't actually even propose that question because they don't even know what Crown of the Shattered Queen actually is. I hope I'm getting that item name right throughout this entire spiel. Anyways, so the other idea is that just because you watch an entire esport and an entire game, or you watch a lot of games, doesn't mean you actually understand them. And this is the same idea of just because you play a lot of League of Legends doesn't mean that you understand League of Legends to a high capacity or high degree. You could just be playing monotonously and not engaging your brain on how to improve. That doesn't mean that you understand League of Legends to a high level. You could have, 2,000 games of bronze. Doesn't mean you're actually intelligent about the game. because you haven't actually expanded your mind in terms of thinking outside of what you're actually playing, right? You're just going through the motions, etc. That's the same thing with journalism or interviews or op-eds, etc. within the entire like journalism space. Just because you do the motions doesn't necessarily mean that you're intelligent about said motions. Right. And this goes to like longtime fans of the esport itself. Just because you've watched a lot of games doesn't mean you're actually intelligent about the game. Now, that does mean that you do have a certain aspect of advantages in terms of that you understand exactly where the esport has gone from versus to where it's going. And you can kind of compare and contrast those separate things, which is something that is a great knowledgeable idea that then you can extrapolate onto the current day and age. And I think that's very important, which is also part of what I supplement my weaknesses as far as me not being incredibly high elo, etc., or knowing the micro aspects of, said champions, etc. And I think at, I guess, the end of the day, when you look at the nuances of where maybe esports journalism or interviewers, etc., fail, or esports websites fail, is you fundamentally look at the tier list. Whenever those happen, you're just like, oh, these guys don't know what the fuck they're talking about, right? Like, I think this is probably the most egregious thing that a lot of fans point towards, and I think rightly so, to say that, yeah, they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, because their eye test fails them, their statistics fails them. They go with kind of brand names, etc. And yeah, I think that's largely right. So we go towards someone that is kind of min-maxed everything, I think, to the best of his capability, and I think he did this the most intelligent way possible, which is Monte Cristo. And the fact that he didn't understand micro, the way that you move a champion, the way that you do lane trades, etc., the matchups that are supposed to win, etc. Instead, he maxed the macro aspect. He understood macro to a very, very high degree, probably better than the majority of pro players and coaches. And so he perfected that aspect. You could think of the people that maybe are trying to, I guess, min-max the emotional versus analytical aspect in the entire journalism spectrum. And I think that has a certain benefit as well, too. And it's to say maybe, too, because people think that one is easier than the other, which I don't think is necessarily true. It just comes on maybe the different perspective that you're looking at, said topic. You could look at maybe Thorn and the fact that he has come from a historical perspective rather than a micro or macro analysis in terms of how people play or, et cetera. Like, he has to have some of that within his historical analysis, but obviously his knowledge about the past references what is happening in the current day. And that's something that you can learn from his perspective, which is very unique in the fact that generally no one can kind of replicate that entire idea because he just has so much historical knowledge and background of that. You think of Fionn, Ashley, and Travis, and the fact that I think they are more emotional and the fact that they can draw upon that emotional aspect, and that's what you go for those people for, right? You don't go for them for the analytical aspect, and if you're trying to do that, then you don't understand why they're doing the way that they're doing things. So, no, I don't think you need to be high ranked. At the end of the day, if you want to take anything away from this video, no, I don't think you need to actually understand the game at a high level to be a great interviewer, a great op-ed writer, a great person that does, speech or does video content, etc. I think you can adapt yourself to a specific niche that you want to do, but it's on you as the viewer to actually realize what you want out of a content creator, out of a journalist, out of a interviewer, to then put yourself to align with whatever you want to see or whatever you want to read or whatever you want to listen to. And it can also even taint the natural approach in terms of maybe people want to try and go out of their lane or spend other time to try and learn some other particular aspect. And the fact that I don't think you're actually going to get someone that knows all of these things to a very high degree. And so I guess in this essence, I would say fans are necessarily trying to expect too much out of, a particular journalist or a particular interviewer. And so that's where I find the trouble with. And I think if you're trying to find like this entire unicorn, you're probably never going to find that person.